It was interesting that the players even took a knee ahead of this game to highlight racial injustice. So very disappointing, is it not?
Yeah, really sad to see some of the abuse that the players have received last night and this morning, but not surprising, and probably not surprising to the players themselves. And it's probably worth reflecting on the fact that the three players who missed the penalties, Marcus Rashford, Jordan Sancho and Bukayo Saka, probably knew that stepping up to take those penalties, that if they did miss, they probably would receive some of this abuse, which kind of, it shows that they were brave, even more brave in that sense, in kind of stepping up to take those penalties.
But then if you say they knew that as they stepped up, surely the pressure would have been even greater on them.
I'm sure it would have, but I think this squad of players, this team of players, have shown themselves to be very strong, resilient individuals, and having the conviction in their own values and their own beliefs, and willing to take a stand in the face of some criticism, both from members of the public, media, but also politicians. And I think that reflects well on them as individuals, not just sportsmen.
Danny, you know, when you look at this abuse, you look at the violence afterwards as well, it feels as if English football really struggles to come of age.
Yes, I think the main story, the main narrative of this tournament has been very positive in terms of building a more inclusive, more open vision of what English national identity can be and what it wants to be. So the scenes last night, and obviously the abuse received online, has marred that, has tainted that a little bit, but I don't think it detracts from what the main story of the last month has been, and that has been a positive one, definitely.
And that's such a good point. You know, they to even get to this final has been such an extraordinary effort. Was the fact that there's been no major hardware for England for so long, did it mean expectations were too high? Should authorities have prepared for this fallout well before the game?
I think that expectation's always going to be there, and it will just be kind of ramped up a little bit more in the next tournament. I think there's serious questions, on a separate note, serious questions about the security in and around Wembley last night, and the level of resources that was provided obviously wasn't sufficient. So I think there will be questions asked about that. As you say, it's probably always going to be expected that people will be drawn to there, and that's not excusing the actions of some of the people who kind of tried to get into the stadium without tickets, and some of the other kind of violence that did occur. But I think the management of the event doesn't look good either.
No, you're right. And the Football Association condemns the abuse that these three players who missed the shootout have suffered. But what are they going to do practically? How do they remedy this?
The FA has acted quickly and acted unequivocally in condemning the abuse, which is obviously the right thing to do. The FA historically, however, has not been great on the issues of racism. It's tended not to deal with matters in-house kind of with enough diligence. I think it's got a particular problem that as an organisation it's not diverse, and there's questions being asked. There's a fan-led review of football governance happening at the moment, and it may be that one of the outcomes of that review is a new regulated football. It may be that the FA itself can't solve some of these issues. So it may be that a new body comes in, and part of its makeup, part of its remit is to address some of the equality, diversity and inclusion issues around football.
Do you think social media operators should also be more vigilant?
Yeah, well, this is a kind of a well-established debate now. This is not a kind of an isolated example. Unfortunately, players of colour, it's quite a common occurrence that they're getting abuse online after particular matches or particular incidents. And there's been repeated calls over the last few years for obviously social media companies to do more. The issue is obviously the government could apply pressure. Ultimately, how much pressure they can apply and whether social media companies will ultimately listen to the government is a different thing. But I think the government could apply more pressure. There's an online harms bill currently going through Parliament, and there's scope for discussion around how social media companies address racism, but obviously all forms of abuse online more effectively, because obviously what they're doing at the moment isn't enough.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be generational, this change over this, getting rid of this out of football?
Yes, I think it is. It's not a short-term fix. It can't be solved in kind of a 3 to 4 week football tournament every couple of years. And I think part of the issue is that football and the national football team carries too much weight. It's the only real English civic institution, and that in itself is a problem. There needs to be more English institutions which are distinct from British institutions, and we don't have that at the moment. So I think football, particularly Gareth Southgate and the squad, have done everything they can over the last 2 years to try and navigate a way to a more inclusive civic English identity, but they need help from other quarters. There needs to be more investment in this idea, politically, and other institutions buying into it as well, because they can't do it on their own.
They've got to get rid of the penalty shootout, surely. That's the solution.
Possibly, yeah, that may help.
It's excruciating. Not only did Italy have to go through it, and then, of course, it's just the most heartbreaking way to see a football game end, but it's probably not going to change anytime soon. Great to talk. Thanks, Danny.
Thanks.